people explain that. And Mark and I are both on the west side of the state, so please feel free to explain what town you're in if that's not clear from your school name. The Oregon geography is so fun to see where everybody is from, and I love visiting the other side of the state, but don't get there as often as I'd like. So thank you for explaining who you are and where you're from. I'm Jennifer Bell. I'm the new math assessment specialist for the Oregon Department of Education. As of Monday, I will have been here for 1 month. So I defer to Mark on most things, but I've been in Oregon education for a long time, and I'm really excited to be a part of the math team at ODE. Mark, go ahead. You can introduce yourself, and then I'll take the next slide.
Yeah, and we're excited to have Jennifer here. So in addition, Mark Freed, math education specialist here at the Oregon Department of Education. So K-12 standards and instructional materials review are the two big buckets, but been working here at ODE for 2009. So actually was presented the Common Core to our state board in 2010. So remember been here for that period, and also the review and revision of our standards in 21.
Thanks, Mark. And go to the next slide. And I'm seeing we've got people from Pendleton and LeGrand. I know where those are, so that's good. And actually have been there.
Yeah.
So fun. Okay, so we're following the framework of the 3 signature practices from CASEL. That's the National Social Emotional Learning Organization. And we always like to start with a warm welcome. We're going to ask you to share some things in the chat, in addition to who you are and where you're from. And then our goal in the middle is to have engaging practices. We're going to talk about where we are in mathematics as a system, where we want to go, and building a bridge to get there. And as we go, we're going to ask for your thoughts mostly in the chat, so be prepared for that. And then at the end, we'll be doing an optimistic closure, a time for reflection and looking forward, and we'll ask you to describe what your next steps are. So as you join us here for the presentation, be thinking about what can I take from this that I can have for action? What can I do next? Next slide. So again, in the chat, what types of mathematics have been most interesting to you in your life? Or is there something that built your confidence or helped you kind of see the purpose of math? Obviously, I've found mathematics interesting in lots of levels, but kind of have some specific areas. I've always found geometry really interesting. Thank you. I see some fellow geometry people. And that ability to see some structure in geometric figures, and then that opportunity to construct that viable argument. So giving claims and reasoning, seeing some answers about math relating to real life situations.
Yeah, I think I always enjoyed all the different disciplines. It wasn't until I think I got to like my graduate work that I had an opportunity to do a data research class, and like I think that was the first time I really like, wait a minute, this is all stuff I'm doing statistics. I actually like there's a reason to do a t-test or a ANOVA, and to use that for my dissertation. I had a reason to use it, and it just seemed more real. And I think I left that experience like I really like data. I like statistics and data, and I think that's my favorite discipline now.
Seeing some answers about algebra and pre-algebra, just those like basic fundamentals. Great examples. Go ahead and keep going in the chat, but we're going to move to the next slide. So this was a news story I just saw the other day, and wanted to just share congratulations. Highest high school graduation rates in the state for IMESD. So I'm sure every single one of you has been a part of that in some way, and we congratulate you on that accomplishment, and also want to recognize that as a system, we've got more work to do. So it's a nice chance to pause and there we go. This is what we want. We want to open doors for all of our kids, but we still have some opportunities to open even more doors. There's that 7%, right? So we celebrate, and what's next? So let's go on to the next slide. So our goals for our session today is to make some connections to the K-8 foundations and then how that supports success in our high school courses, particular Core 2, identify some strategies to help you design high quality high school course options that align with that transition to college, and examine some engagement focused approaches. So there's value relevance and students' math identity is a big piece of the puzzle. We once heard someone frame it as a mathematically traumatized society. We don't want to do that to our students, but math identity is real and something to be aware of. And then we've got ODE resources to share, including the Oregon Math Project and the roadmap to help your system support students and their persistence and readiness for post-secondary. Next slide. There we go. So we've all inherited a system, and there have been changes and improvements and things along the way, but we're still inheriting a system that has some challenges. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And as we go through each data set, I invite you to share your answers to these questions. Just what do you notice, or what do you wonder? How does this data make you feel? So this is the National Assessment of Educational Progress for the last 30 years. What do you notice?
Which is my professional career. I realized it's like
Yeah.
just the realization is like I think I'm back to where we started in 2000. So yeah, just naming it, and that's something that we notice in our system.
So please feel free to drop some noticings, wonderings. That's grades 4 and 8. Concerned. That is an appropriate feeling. And just for transparency, that's my professional career as well. Started teaching last century, but just at the end of it.
Yeah, I remember it was at the beginning, like it was my most of my professional career has been marked defined by No Child Left Behind. Like that was like we were going to have like grade level standards, we're going to have update our assessments, we're going to update our textbooks, and I just remember it's like we're going to have like 100% proficiency by 2015 or something like that. And like it just I think the reality is I think just naming this is like that didn't come out that way. And so one of the things I think about, like as we think about our system that we move forward with, is kind of like we have an opportunity to continue some things, but then we have opportunity to change. It's like what we want to change is something I'm thinking about too. It's like what am I do different that so we just don't necessarily repeat. I think the things we talked about in 2000, which were good intent, but I think it's been long enough. They said like it hasn't achieved the goals that I think we were hoping them 20 years ago.
Go ahead and keep typing your reactions to this one. And yeah, let's look at the next one. So this is kind of like the SEED survey. It's the survey that goes with that National Assessment of Educational Progress. There's a survey that asks them questions about things like their confidence in math and their interest or enjoyment in math. And you can see there at the bottom, Oregon's there in the lowest 29th percentile. Lowest percentile.
Yeah, that was like those states are
percentage.
like
Sorry.
I think we're trying to. So this is like one of the things I've learned, like digging into the student surveys and the teacher surveys. This was something that stood out to me, like just enjoyment in math and interest in problem solving, like compared to other states. Our students are not reporting the same. I know this is self-reporting data, but that's a hope I would have, like how we lay that foundation, in K-8 we're talking about.
And it's 29% of fourth grade students that,
It's about the same for eighth grade too. So it's about
okay,
the, hmm.
that said math is their favorite subject. 29%. Eesh.
Or they enjoy math. They agree with the statements.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
the highest on there, like DC and Mississippi, I think, are some of the states you might hear NAEP. So there is a difference in that spectrum there.
Okay, next slide. So even though we've got high graduation rates or higher, like we're moving in the right direction, our graduates are being placed in remedial courses in college and university. And few of our students are passing those entry-level math classes after they've been placed in those courses. So it's not opening doors for students.
Yeah.
Mark,
So
did you
this
want to add?
Yeah, this study, like the top graph is showing, like basically, these are students who have succeeded in our system. These are students who have graduated, they completed the credits, and so like it's about a majority of students are being placed into um, remedial classes that go to college. And then if you're placed in a remedial class, the bottom graph is basically like, it's like a survival rate. So we talk about like what the dropout rate might be for high school. Well, this is like, so the idea is like, well, how many students actually complete a degree or certificate if they're placed into a remedial class and it's less than 30%. So it's a 70% dropout rate if students are not placed in a 100 level class when they graduate. And this is something we see um, and one thing I also would note, like this is across the all courses that students, the highest level course they could completed. So there are students in Algebra 2 being placed into remedial classes, or students who've completed pre-calculus being placed in remedial classes, and there are students who've completed calculus being placed in remedial classes. So that is not a non-zero number too. So I think that speaks to system alignment. How is this compared to other states? I think it's similar. I think there's in higher education, I think that's one thing we want to raise awareness of, like this question of like they talk about the runway, a long runway to like that first 100 level class. Um, if there's 3 or 4 classes, how can they shorten the runway? How can they make it fewer classes or maybe even place students directly in 100 level class right from the start are things that universities are talking about how to like rethink the system. So it could be part of the problem is placement, part of it could be the design, and part of it could be just preparation. So it's probably a combination of all those factors.
And go on to the next slide. Just a review of those data sources. And, um, our systems are designed to get the results they get. We want to shift our thinking, um, and we're getting consistent results. So if these are not the outcomes we want, what can we do? What can we do to change it?
I think this was one of the things that's clicked with me in the last 10 years is thinking from like when you see results like this, like the 30% proficiency rates or flat NAEP, um, you're instinctive like that's a bad outcome, so the system might not be working. So like what's not working? It's like is it the system's okay and we're just not implementing it correctly, or is it something with like maybe the system was designed to do this and we need to have a different system? And I think what I'm starting to think about is if we see consistent results year after year, then it seems like that's a system design issue. Like, what if our system is designed to identify 30% of our students as proficient? And so that's a like, are we ready to have 100% proficiency even? And so I think if we're seeing consistent results year after year, then that could be like I think there's an underlying system question that we should be kind of thinking about. So what could that system look like? That's different. It's kind of the underlying kind of questions we've been asking with some of the reimagining high school kind of sequence.
And go to the next slide. And this came from the Mathematics Association of America, the Common Vision report that came out in 2015. Just the status quo is unacceptable. So we've described some kind of sad parts of our system and things that we are hoping to change. Um, and we do have some progress in the last 10 years that we can point to, and some bright spots and some things. So we're kind of starting with the doom and the gloom, but there is hope, and there has been some movement. And we're, the most recent NAEP results didn't look any better. And so we're still not seeing the percentages of kids proficient that we want to, on our assessments. So there's uh, there's struggle, and yet there's some hope. So go ahead, Mark, take it away.
Yeah, and I think just kind of this Mathematical Association America report, I would encourage you to, I mean, one thing we try to do in this presentation is include as many resources as we can to like you can click and find this. And so the MAA report was really like a deep dive in undergraduate programs. So what we're noticing in like our K-12 system, like students are not challenged by the math classes or think it's connected to their careers. They're seeing that in colleges too. So this is again, a system issue. And so they recognize that, and that's the status quo is like, are we going to continue for another generation this type of pattern? And so the things that they're talking about in universities are like things we're going to talk about today, like making math engaging, making math relevant. Like these are things they're talking about in university. So this is part of the systems alignment is to like how do we can connect with conversations that are happening in post-secondary as well. So thinking about the system design, what the system we inherited, we use the filter and pump metaphor when we talk about the Oregon Math Project. So what is the Oregon Math Project? That is an umbrella term that we've used to describe any work to engineer a more equitable system for our students. And this is a pre-K to college conversation. So it's not a just K-12, but we're actively engaged with higher ed. I would like we want to include pre-K, and I think there's space to do that in early elementary. But when we talk about improving math outcomes, we're thinking system wide, and so we talk about the filter as the kind of the system we inherited. We inherited a system that was engineered to sort, filter, and label. Our high school math sequence was first developed in 1890 with a committee of 10. That's where you see algebra, geometry, algebra 2 pop up. And that committee was charged with like, how do we identify students who are able to go to Harvard and Yale? Because everyone can't go there. So we need to have like a way to like identify a subset of our students that could um, attend higher education. So it was the beginning of this idea of like a college preparatory kind of system that connected K to college. And so that system was designed from the start to kind of like elevate some learners as, like ready to go next level. And I could think that that system is still has connections to our current system. So it's not just about tweaking. I think we have to kind of shift the thinking from like, let's just not make a better filter. It's kind of like, how do we replace that filter with something else? And the something else, as we talk about, is a pump metaphor. So it's like, what would a system look like where all students can be moved through and have opportunities to succeed? And so this would be um, that would be like connected to your career, your interests. So that is the idea. Like, so we need to, how do we move from a system that we've inherited of filtering, labeling to one that is supporting students in their aspirational goals and moving through the system. So, um, yeah, so the four cornerstones we'll reinforce this today too, but we're talking about focus, engagement, pathways, and belonging. And at a high level, focus is like we talk about the mile wide inch deep issues. So it's a long list of topics. So how can we narrow that topic on a shorter set of like core ideas? That's the work of focus. How can we create more instructional time to do something else? And so like what is that something else is the engagement. So it's like if we create time to focus on topics, it's because we want to do deeper more engaging work with fewer topics. So that's how focus and engagement kind of work together. And then I think of pathways and belonging as like two sides of a coin, where pathways is how can we attend to the individual needs of our students, where they might be at in their math journey as they go through our system, have some student choice, and agency in the math that they can pursue. Like I like statistics. Can I study this more at some point? So that's kind of the pathway conversation. And then belonging is how do we meet the universal needs of our students? Like all students um, should be able to walk into a math class and feel like I belong here. I can put my ideas out. I can pursue topics I'm interested in. So, um, though I think the system we inherited is a system that labels math people, not math people. So how can we have a system that is we're all math people? We all can be doing this work. And so that's the conversation around belonging. Um, so I think I'm looking at I don't know, there's any comments we want to point out before I move on to the next one? I think the question about Algebra 1, we do have the last time we adopted standard our graduation requirements, we have a clause in our graduation requirements that is Algebra 1 above for high school math. And the intent of that was students should be placed in like an Algebra 1 class in grade 9. So what with the system we had 10 years ago, there were students who were taking 3 or 4 years of essentially K-5 or middle school math and graduate from high school. So that floor, like elevating the floor, was the intent of our last update to our graduation requirements. And so we have seen that convergence in grade 9 around Algebra 1. But if we look at the pathway I'll have a graphic of what it looks like after that. But after that, it's kind of goes back to the Wild West a little bit. So we don't have that same systemic kind of coherence after they can move through an Algebra 1.
And I think the comment about how it plays out in real life is part of what we wanted to talk about today. We've got some examples of some innovative ways of addressing that need for all students to feel a sense of belonging and have pathways that make sense and all of those things. So we'll hopefully we can provide some ideas to support that. The challenges of as is pointed out in the chat of real life are
Mm-hmm.
real. And so there's systems barriers, and there might be opportunities to break those barriers. And we hope that we offer some things that'll be helpful.
Yeah, and I see Mitch's comment too about elementary and secondary, and I have children in the system. I'm going to have a senior this year. He's graduating from South, and I have two children right behind him. And so I saw like they had some amazing elementary teachers in math, and I think that's like I think part of like I mean there's all work we can do at all levels, but I think there's some really great work happening in elementary, and I think as they transition to secondary math, it did feel a little bit disconnected in some ways, like that real life challenge. Like uh, it was a challenge for our own families to kind of navigate it too. So how do we keep that joy sustained is something that I hope to. Um, we'll we'll have some examples in this lesson, but I think that's what we're trying, like why we had the secondary elementary kind of focus. So I'm a high school teacher too. That's my background. I taught high school and middle school math. I also taught math methods courses, and I've observed classrooms in Oregon, Washington, and around the country too. So my heart is a high school math teacher. So I'm speaking as a math teacher. It's like I wish my first year class was a lot more interesting than it was in 2000. So I will own that. But I think that's part of why we just want to name it. And I think we want to like how can we reimagine systems? So we'll share more about what we've been talking about in high school
Yeah.
math.
And as
So
Mark
talk.
goes to the next slide, my heart is in the seventh grade, but I student taught in high school and have spent time K-12 now, and there's challenges at all levels. So you go on to the next one.
Yeah. And so I think the first part we want to try to connect the systems. And so I think I think the difference with the K-8 and as we move into high school and college is kind of like I think there is a progression that we have in our elementary and middle school where we basically have like students doing grade level content and being moved through. So it's basically like a similar system where we want every student have access to high quality seventh grade, every student have eighth grade, or sixth grade, whatever grade they're in, access to that content. But at some point, it's kind of like, at what point can we start specializing? At what point can students move from a system like we want to do all the same content to kind of that specialization, because that's like these branches, and move into post-secondary? And so the core two idea is like it's 2 credits beyond eighth grade math. We want everyone to have that K-8 foundation, and there is still 2 more credits worth of work, about a year's worth of algebra, a semester of data, that's a 21st century skill, and then it's about a semester's worth of geometry. That's the core 2 credit idea. So I'm connecting these two together because I think these are what I speak to. I always want to see at both levels. So 3 foundations, a strong foundation for K-8 and high school math, access to grade level or course level content, thinking about engagement, relevancy in our students' lives at these levels, and also then the interdisciplinary nature of like higher order thinking is something we want to, as a third foundation of a strong K-8 and core 2 system. So the first part, grade level math or course level math. So there's 2 reports I put in here. One is the opportunity myth, right, from the New Teachers Project, TNTP. And there was an iceberg problem report from New Classrooms. And what I put them side by side to each other because like the 2 reports are kind of telling us different things. There's a paradox here. Do we slow down or go fast? And so the paradox being like the opportunity myth, they went into like thousands of classrooms and they analyzed what content were students actually doing on their worksheets and the lectures, and they were looking at elementary and middle school, primarily K-8. And what they found, the, the punchline is like most of the time, like over 50%, was not on grade level math. It was on grade level content from a prior grade, usually. And this was increased with like schools and communities that had like higher students of color percentage populations and uh, lower socioeconomic status. So those communities that need it the most actually had less grade level math. And so so I think there's a natural instinct that we want to help our students. Like he's like, whatever grade it is, fourth grade, let's go help you with K2. And so, but at what point is that fourth grade class no longer fourth grade if we're spending majority of time on prior grade level content is kind of the question the TNTP or asks. And so the opportunity myth is you think you have opportunity to grade level math, you get to the state assessment, but you only had like 10 or 20% of the time working on that fourth grade math when you get to the state assessment. So did you have the opportunity to learn grade level math? At the same time, our system is built around grade accountability. We have state assessments. And so there's an urgency to like get students caught up, to skip. And I would say even in the secondary, to skip entire years. Like we got to get students into high school math in middle school, and we got a year or two college math in high school. So it's kind of like if we're splitting our time between grade level, we're doing prior grade level math, or a seventh grade student is doing like high school algebra content or something like that, that window just got smaller in terms of like access to grade level content. And so it's it's a challenge. So that's the paradox I would just name here. And at the end, I will share what the 2 authors of the report came together and tried to address that paradox of what they would recommend for teachers. But slow down or get faster. So these are some reports from the New Teacher Project that came afterwards. So I'll leave his links for you to explore. I would just name that this term acceleration has a specific meaning in these documents that does not mean skipping grades. When they use the term acceleration, they're talking about accelerating students within the grade level content. So it would be students come in, how do we work with a student who's not at grade level? They're a fourth grade student and they need third grade help. Accelerating is how to accelerate that student up to grade level content. So it's more about like providing those just in time supports, about how do we like if a student needs help with fractions, even like in high school, like I had students that I had to like remind them like how do we add fractions unlike denominators, like ninth grade students. And there was a textbook, I remember when we were reviewing state textbooks, there was a textbook we looked at, and we looked at all the coefficients in the textbook, and none of the coefficients, all the coefficients were whole numbers. But like just students working with high school math, they were using whole number coefficients. Like what opportunity they have to even use decimals and fractions in this chapter. And so I think the opportunities are like, how can we use something like polynomial arithmetic in high school as an opportunity to provide just-in-time supports for arithmetic as we teach it. So maybe those fraction by using fraction coefficients, there could be an opportunity to have a side conversation about the student about those fraction addition skills without having them feel like they're in a fourth grade class again. That's the idea of kind of acceleration when we talk about these reports. And so lots of data and reports from this since that report came out almost like 8 years ago now. And thinking about like when we talk about tier one instruction, that is high quality core instruction with a adopted text. We talk about tier two instruction, thinking of like an MTSS model. Like tier two would be how do we provide the supports for students who are struggling to get up to grade level. When students might be ready for more, how can we get them to do deeper work without necessarily having to skip a grade kind of thing. So it's like keeping them in the classroom is the kind of the tier two. And then tier three would be actually like having a student move up to another grade level or hold them back a grade level, like or take them out into a like physically take them like to a different room and have them work on something. That would be kind of like that tier three level kind of work if we think about, and hopefully each level has fewer and fewer students in it as we move up. Um, So access to grade level content, it's one foundation for all the classes. And so that's our high school adopted standards in core two is grade level content. That's what we consider course level content in the core two. So there's like we tried to help you out. I think there's 27 algebra standards instead of like I think like 100 and something in Common Core. So we really tried to like focus on those big ideas in algebra, and then we try to have about 14 or 15 standards in geometry and data. And so we try to get that balance on that core too. I think there's more work we could do, even focus it more, but that was a big chunk we try to do when we adopt standards. The second foundation thinking about is about access to engage that engagement idea, like engaging relevant content. So one project we did right before COVID, like for a few years, we had a math in real life grant, and it was, I still was like, I think it was my favorite grants. We took high school teachers and we put them out, we connected them with um, business and industry or teachers in their building, like a science teacher or CTE teacher, and we asked them to make a lesson. And so it was like, I called it taking high school math teachers and put them in the wild and have to like create a lesson. So I got experience like a group of math teachers being in a uh, uh, dairy farm at Oregon State, and we had to come up with a dairy example of like a math lesson. So, and what we learned, like there was like it was kind of a revelation, I think, for the high school teachers, like, oh, this is like I can actually like using. I would be honest, as a math teacher, I don't think I ever could answer that question very well. When am I going to use this other than your next course? And so I really like engaging with people who are using math in real life and bring that in is something that was part of that math in real life rant. And I have another report there talking about like student is a student report saying like, do you get to use math in your classroom? And so again, it's one of those data points. It's a little sad, like, but majority of students like they don't have opportunities to like use math, and they wish and they would welcome it. I think they would like please give me those opportunities to use math. And so 70% of students said if they had that chance, they would grab it. They would really want to have it, but they just don't have it in this math classes. So when I think about engagement, like I talk about fiction, nonfiction problems. The fiction problem, like we have fiction, nonfiction text and language arts, and so like fiction problems would be that the tree that has the 3 4 5 shadow on the ground or something like that. It's like everything comes out to whole numbers. It all works out like so. It's like there's a place for that if we're going to introduce something like trigonometry, have friendly numbers, have those kind of ideas that we can introduce it. But that's a just recognize that's like a fiction application versus like a real life application would be like go out into the real world and find it heights of trees and realize they don't have shadows. And I think one thing I actually like through that grant we did um, work with a forester, and his job was part of his job was to find the heights of the trees. But that wasn't the question he was trying to answer in real life. Like that wasn't what he was getting paid to do. His job was to find when is this field ready for harvest. So he had to find the volume of the trees and determine how much, like when would it be the right time to bring all the equipment in. And so like that's a real life question. Like that's a nonfiction question that someone actually has to answer. So it's a spectrum. Um, if you're on the fiction side, how can we move over to a little bit more to the nonfiction side as kind of and more engagement? And also, I think the other kind of axis I'm thinking about is how relevant is this to students' life? It's like, am I going to be a dairy farmer? Well, it's that no, I don't think everyone's going to be a dairy farmer. Not everyone's going to be a forester. I think everyone can engage in those topics for a while. But at some point, like how do we help them specialize? And so if they're always living in topics that they don't see the connection, they're not interested, like that's kind of that low interest, low engagement, um, opportunities to specialize and focus those topics raises the rigor, raises the interest. And so as I think about like moving from low engagement to higher engagement, it's like what iterative steps can we do? And it's not a black and white, it's not an either or, it's a continuum. There's a continuum. It's like, so as we want to like think more engagement is somehow moving from that lower left quadrant to the upper right quadrant for students in our classrooms. I wanted to share a video because I want to stop talking with the students. Um, so I want you to hear their students. So this video is we interviewed students that were part of that Math in Real Life grant about their experience. And these would be eighth grade Algebra 1 students. So these are students that are taking that high school math class in eighth grade that were part of this. And so these are honor students. I would just frame that in terms of like what they experience. And so that's what we try to do is move that, make it that dial more engagement. And I just will let them share what their experience was now. So I will pause. I hope this will work. It's about two-minute video. We'll listen to their voices. Let me know if you can't hear it in the chat.
A lot of different issues and just like people did projects online. Material. Some
All right, I'll pause there. Um, I'll pause. Just like it's like this is our like I think like what if something stood out or you heard students say, you can put in the chat, or if you want to unmute, I think it's fine to voice something as well, observations.
Well, I heard students constantly saying, you know, math, it's like, why am I doing this? They got excited when it was something that they could relate and understand within their own life, because math is going to stick when they are applying it to something that makes sense to them or that they are interested in. I think this is the one area that has to be changed in order for our students to be able to be more proficient with math skills.
Yeah. And this is, I think, this is a secondary. I think it's like, I think, especially as we get into high school and middle school, like, the quote I keep when I play this video, I hear about different things, but it's like, like it didn't feel like a math class. It didn't like we knew we're in a math class, but it's like, wait a minute, this is, so I'm wondering, like, what is that feeling of math class? Like, what's math class feel like for students? Um, it's like what, and I think that is if they feel like it's an obligation, it's just, I gotta do this, I just have to please the teacher. That's why I think we should pay attention to that. And then if we hear like engagement, like if it's relevant to them, like that's one. And like I think kids are just interested in, if is this relevant to anybody? Like they were just solving problems like they may not do in their real, like in their life, but they were solving problems that people somewhere is trying to figure out, and that was engaging to them too.
Can I
It's
say
kind of,
something?
yeah.
I teach project-based math, and I could sit and we could do the most, like, and we have a lot of fun. We just did trig, and we used an inclinometer, and they were using tangent. Some of them never even went to algebra 1. And I can tell you, when they sit for that SBAC, they're not going to know how to answer any of those questions. I mean, I can make math engaging, and they know they're doing slope when we are measuring objects coming down a ramp and speed. And like, I feel good like they're getting the math, but I can't be convinced that I don't know if I'm doing them justice when they do get to those sit down state tests where they feel successful in my class and they love math, and they say, I never even thought I could ever do math. And then I don't know. Do you understand like what concerns me?
Absolutely. And I've got a few slides later to talk a little bit about the assessment and the efforts that have been made to have it match what you described. We want kids learning math in ways, again, like you described, where they're communicating and they're doing problem solving. And there have been lots of efforts to have the assessment match. So we'll address that a little bit more later. The system isn't perfect, and we know that.
I think that's the
So,
system we inherited too.
yeah,
So,
but we can talk about it a little more.
and I think it's like, I think if we had a system where students were coming out saying like, like I can see the relevance, I was engaging, it's like, I think that is a worthy goal in itself. It's like, if I would rather have students who engaged in math and left with a positive identity. It's like, if the alternative is students who may know procedural, don't like math, but they do good in assessment, that's not, I don't think that's a good goal. So I think, so
I don't either. Let's focus
Yeah.
on them liking math, being engaged in school, understanding its relevancy, and not throw us slides that tell us how terrible they're doing when they're sitting at a test in the 11th grade. And our students in Pendleton, our top students their parents opt them out of taking that test. And when the test also doesn't show us that they took 79 seconds to take that test. When I know the state has the ability to aggregate the data of how long that student sat for that test when they opened it and when they closed it. So I'm just not sure how, like, sometimes our data, I'm not sure how strong it is.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Good questions.
Well, I think I left that grant, that's part of the reason why I think that's one of my favorite grants, that engage. It's like we made engaged lessons, and I think the secret to the sauce was math teachers working with someone, collaborating with someone else. Like, you don't have to do this by yourself. It was a collaboration effort, and if you can collaborate with someone that brings a different perspective than you. Like even if it's a science teacher in your building or a CTE teacher, like you have opportunity to collaborate and build a lesson together. The outcome of those lessons is what those students were doing. And I think they saw the engagement rise just because, oh, like that they pre-baked the idea of like when people are going to use this in the lessons themselves. All right, so some other links we put in here, connection, foundational thinking about strong K-8 math. We have STEAM and STEM toolkit, so that is been published. So I think there are some connections to this idea of integrated learning. This is our third foundation, connecting math to like, interdisciplinary ideas, cross-content ideas, building a story. So there's a lot of things in that STEAM toolkit. So I try to highlight some of those on the slide in terms of like engagement and rigor. And also, we also have an adolescent literacy framework. And in the adolescent literacy framework, we do have a math specific toolkit that is talking about how do we read and write and think like write a mathematician. And so we designed that toolkit with the intention of like thinking about like how can we in our math classes help support the literacy of our students as well and be able to like make an argument or write a like a step-by-step process of making a peanut butter sandwich or an IKEA uh, furniture instructions, which is the way we tend to write in math is very um, step by step in that sense. And so it's a different way of reading, it's a different way of writing. And so I think helping our students understand that is part of the disciplinary literacy in mathematics. And so the interdisciplinary work is like it's our collective responsibility as a system to help with this. And there are ways we think in math class we can support the literacy in the secondary level. So the adolescent literacy was really designed for those students at that secondary level. And I think I want to do one more video and then I'll pause and see where we're at. How's that sound, Jennifer?
That sounds great. And as you go to
Okay.
that next slide, again, that adolescent literacy framework talks about the math, like the literacy that's necessary for mathematics and the types of reading you do in mathematics and the types of communicating you do in math. And so there are some resources there to support that aspect of looking at math instruction a little more globally.
Yeah, so the links are in the chat. I have one more video I want to play with students, and so feel free to open those up, take a look at those as you may hear the video. But the video I wanted to share was an example of interdisciplinary learning. And so the example I chose, I went to the CTE Center, so CTEC Center here in Salem, is a school that all the high schools are able to send students to, and it's very much a project-based learning environment. And so I talked with the math teachers there. I still like math in real life. I think one of my favorite grants. I go in CTEC and talking to the CTEC math teachers was great too. So I wanted to share a little bit of this too, like as a foundation of students having an opportunity to not just learn math, but to learn math and use it in a high school setting. All right. So I think it's just like the examples, like when they say like ordering the concrete truck, in that case, they actually had a concrete truck that was coming that based on their order that they did in the first month. So they build the sheds example, and then the second year they actually build a house, and so they actually build a house that they sell. So I think it's there's that fiction real, and then there's real, and so that is like how can like I took students out in the parking lot to find the heights of the tree. I tried to be real, but it wasn't until I actually got to like meet the forester and I realized, oh, if I just change the question to like, is this field ready for harvest? Now that's making it a little bit more real. And so it's like I think that authenticity is something that we want to build into our system as well. So I will try to get through, and I don't want to hand it off to you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
But
It's all right. We've got about 15 minutes left.
All right, so I'll summarize it as best. I'll go through quick, and so I'll switch it. But this is the summary of that report from the two authors from that first, like the slow down and speed up. And so they came together and said, like, how do we maintain this? As part of it is this: give them access to grade level content. Attend to that cumulative nature of math. Give that just-in-time support. Just name that's happening in the post-secondary. That remediation rate there. They're calling it co-requisites. And so they're placing students straight into a 100 level course with support. And they're finding that students have success. Like they didn't need to take those 3 or 4 levels of prereqs, math 60 or math 80, put them straight into a 100 level course, give them support. They're succeeding. And so that's one way we can probably reduce the number of students being placed in that remedial math. And then also engagement. That's the great equalizer. Engagement, real life, and building on what students know and are interested in is what's something that will help accelerate that mathematics. And so I think you see that in the CTEC where students may not have succeeded, but now they are accelerating their learning because they're being pulled into that context and find that interesting. So the bridge, we think this is the traditional kind of sequence. We think like middle, high school, college. This is my graphic. We did a study of like following students through math and can't read like what I hope you take away from it is it's kind of a mess. I call it the Plinko game. So it's kind of like there is here in the middle here, like the second row is all the different courses. Like the first row is all the courses they take in 8th grade. The second row is all the courses they take in 9th grade. 10th grade is the third row, and the bottom row is the 11th grade courses. And so you see a convergence around Algebra 1 in grade 9 with our students. But after that, they're all over the place. And so like there's a group of students, I think like about 20% of our students take multiple years of Algebra 1. There is a group of students that takes pre-algebra 4 years in a row. There's the red line is like not moving upward in the system. So the green lines are some kind of upward movement. And so that is what we observe in our system. So the goal is thinking about pathways. I talked about the core 2. The core 2 is having that solid foundation of 2 years of high school math beyond 8th grade. We want it to be rigorous course base like algebra content, but we also want to build in this applied learning, all those connections. We want to build space for that in that core 2 experience. So everyone has that in the first 2 years, has that solid foundation. And then once they have that, they can move to the idea of +1 as a math elective idea. So you could take a class that aligns to your interest. So if your interest is I'm going to be in a major that requires calculus, great. There's an Algebra 2 class or there's a pre-calculus class. These are classes you can take in that pathway. Or if I'm interested in a data class, you could take a full year data class or a quantitative class like a construction geometry or things, courses like that. So these are options that we want to like create space for in our system to design that better system for our students. Again, that pump, like how we get students moving through the system and aligned to their interests. So we're part of a Launch Years initiative. So we're having this conversation with 20 other states. So it's not alone on this. Some resources we're working on right now, the Oregon Math Project. So that is on the ODU website. So you can find things like we have ambitious teaching modules, like how to like teach to heterogeneous groupings of students. There's a toolkit on there about the high school pathways, and we're starting to build blueprints, courses. So the two I would point out, like big projects happening right now, is we're doing a pre-calculus pilot that we're combining Algebra 2 with Math 111, Math 112 that could be offered as a dual credit. So the idea is you could potentially, if you're ready, go into pre-calculus from Core 2, or you could take a different course like construction geometry in grade 11 and still take pre-calculus in grade 12 if you choose. And so that's kind of the design of that pre-calculus. And the other part is creating a data pathway. So a 100 level data course that's going to be offered at our community colleges and universities starting like this next year. So it's like if you took a data course, what can you take next? Math 108 is a new course that we're developing in the universities to create that data science work. And also we're working with some smaller districts. Math reasoning and modeling is Wallowa County, like a MMR, it's kind of a quantitative course alternative. And Dana Center is also working on a integrated statistic and quantitative reasoning course. That could be an alternative, like a standalone third credit course. So lots of things happening. I don't know. I think I hit my 5 minutes. So I think I want to turn it over to Jennifer and make sure we get through assessments as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, and again, there are alignments to the system. Nothing's perfect, and it all takes partnership and continued work and a focus on what we want for our kids. And we've shared some barriers and some challenges today, but we've also shared some, hopefully some hope and some things that can be done. Let's go to the next slide. And these are some of the alignment efforts with higher education, with endorsement structures for teachers, allowing more teachers to teach more courses. That's some work that Mark's been doing. And then there's future alignment work, updating the coding and the naming conventions so that 2+1 pathway feels valid. So let's go to the next slide. And like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about assessment. And again, I'm new to ODE, but I've been involved in math education and in assessment in this state for a long time. And the improvements that have happened since those initial state tests on, bubble sheets and then OAKS, we have really focused our assessment, and it's continuing to get closer and closer all the time to alignment to the skills we want our kids to be building in their classrooms. So those content standards for Claim 1 are specific to each grade level. Remember, for our newest Oregon math standards, they're really focused on those first 2 years of high school math. So when kids take the assessment, in theory, they've had that opportunity to learn those standards with support and have some application time in those future courses. And then we have the practice standards on our assessment. We're looking for communication. We're looking for problem solving. And go to the next slide. If you want to know even more about the number of items and all the details, they're on our state math assessment website, and I'll stick that in the chat, and my email too if you want to continue this conversation. But you can see those depth of knowledge levels are not all at one. Our assessment is matched to this rigor that we are looking for with our instruction as well. And then also, the blueprints note which standards are priorities and which are supporting, and you can see the number of items is proportional. So if you're doing this good problem-solving, engaging work on those priority standards, students are more likely to be ready for demonstrating what they know on the state test. And then there's one more resource on the next slide. Oh, there we go. That's on our state website. That's an Excel file with all the achievement level descriptors. So again, if you focus on those priority standards for your course, and you can see exactly what the achievement levels look like for students on the state test. There's also a tab for performance tasks that you can use to meet that local performance assessment requirement. But remember that you can use anything from your instructional materials or from your course that gives kids an opportunity to be scored on a rubric around problem solving. And so there's lots of space in our system that used to be real rigid that has expanded to ideally match what's happening in classrooms. Again, I'll put my email in the chat, and the link to the math assessment website where you can find all these resources and more. And if you want to learn more about the assessment, we're doing another presentation at 12:30 with ELA and science as well. So if you want to hear more about specifics, we can talk about that too. And I'll turn it back to Mark, I think.
Yeah, I think we'll just land on this slide, or like one like you made it 70 minutes. Just to kind of summarize, I think, and then we'll open up for questions and see if like we want to respond to chat questions. But just like that again, like the thinking, like reimagining systems, moving from a filter that we may have inherited and replacing it with a pump, and so that looks different within the cornerstone ideas of the project is like the work we are going to be asking us as a system, K-12, and I think especially kind of like as students move up into our high school classrooms, that like what does that look like? So just we talk about placemat, so just images only kind of thinking like, so when I think about focus, it's like how do we move from that mile wide inch deep where we're just kind of like just moving around and just like scuba diving on the upper left to like we could have like we're a tour guide, we're going to park our boat here and we're going to understand it deeply, and then we're going to move our boat to the next section and study that deeply. And so it's not just it's like we have opportunities to get deep, and we're connecting. Like we're going to spend some time in geometry here, we're going to spend some time in algebra, and we're going to move on to different topics, but we get students a chance to understand that deeply. Thinking about engagement, like the rows, and just like we've inherited a system that where it's like, yeah, like the I think that 1890 picture of the students in rows. Modern classrooms, I mean, the clothes have changed, but it's like, has our instruction really changed? As students move from, slate boards to maybe laptops, but they're still staying in rooms, and it's still an individual kind of activity, versus the pump idea is like that one picture is from Math in Real Life where students were plugging in, I think it was LED lights and like Christmas lights. So LED versus conventional, like which one would be better to use, depending on how much. So they were calculating that. And so they're on the floor doing those experiments. And then also the bottom picture there, right above the pump there on the far right, that's a picture from MIT. That's the classroom at MIT. So what's happening is like, we want to prepare students for MIT. Great. They're not in rows. They're up. They're on whiteboards. They're doing real life problems. And so like, that is the world that our elite universities are moving to. Then it's like that's what we want to prepare them to, kind of world. And so when I think about pathways, moving from this idea of a single track where the only variable is how fast you go up and down, to a system of like interconnected freeways where you're still moving, but there's at some point choice and agency where we can drive to the destinations we want. And then the belonging just being, there are students on the outside looking in. There are students who are been labeled and sorted as not a math person and not able to engage in it. Where it's like, how can we move to like a community-based kind of like heterogeneous kind of like learning community where it's like we're all in this boat together and we're all contributing. We're all like, I try and come up with an image that's like of a whitewater rafting trip. We're all trying to paddle down this experience together. And part of that is one of the things I heard from Mark from CTech was like, like how we treat errors. How do we treat like there's room for error, there's room for like mistake, there's room for iteration and drafting. And so like those things help include more people, because if they're scared to put an out answer because they don't know if it's right or not, that's excluding them if they can't engage in it. So those are all things together. It's a complex system, but on one slide, hopefully I tried to capture that. So I'll pause there and see what, I don't know if there's anything you want in the chat.
Go ahead.
First.
Thanks, Mark. Go ahead and go to the next slide so we can do our little bit of closure. We've got 2 minutes left, and there's some great comments in the chat about the struggles with differentiation. That is real. Giving kids access to grade level content with support can look lots of different ways. And we've shared some resources that new teacher project, if you dig into those resources, might give you some ideas. But let's ask the group. So what are some ways to turn math from a filter into a pump? So what's one little thing, what's one step within your locus of control that you could take soon to help increase the number of kids that are feeling success in our system. And we're seeing some ideas about connections to CTE. There's lots of great work going on in our state around that. And Angie shared that there are some schools in this region that are offering courses that are doing these things and offering math credit for them. So the answer is in the partnerships. And so we encourage you to find those partners and get connected, and feel free to please connect with us, and let's keep the conversation going so we can find that joy and help students get more access to what they want. And I think
I see the references to the geometry, construction geometry. That's a great example. I know Union and yeah, like I think Angie noted that there's it's like just platooning the class, like you're connecting the class intentionally with like you're doing the math in this class, and then you're going to have an opportunity to use it somewhere else, and it's like that partnership. I think so. Maybe between math and science, they collect data in a science class, and they have opportunities to bring it to math class to compute, and they can bring it back. So there's a relationship between the different subjects. I think that can have. It doesn't have to be a large school. It can just be. It just takes two teachers to talk to each other. So I think that I would encourage us to think about that cross collaboration.
And it could be, I would say it could be a teacher and a community partner.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different opportunities. Mark, if you want to go to the next slide, I think we're at time. And you'll see both of our email addresses. And thank you all so much for engaging in this. It's not easy work. And we hope we've given you some hope and some things to try. Yeah.